Yeah, here we are. Another episode of Shoot the Shit with Joey Zaza. Here we have casual conversations with intelligent people. Um, Hopefully I'm included within those intelligent people. John really isn't. But
I have my moments.
yeah, you do have your moments. I'm gonna agree on that. You have your moments. Riestra, please let everybody know your name, what it is that you do, and you know what? I'm gonna lean back with my coffee, and I'm gonna give you the microphone because I am really eager to learn today. Today we're about the Intentona De Yauco and hopefully a little bit of information about Don Fidel Velez and our page name and our finca name is called Torre del Viejo. He is actually the original owner of Torre del Viejo. It's an actual place. It's an actual thing. I believe it was a secret society. Man, take it away, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Excited about this. As you already said, my name is Riestra, Juan Riestra. I'm a scholar from San Juan, yeah, but I'm living in Ponce, so I consider myself Ponceño. I've been living here for 14 years. I'm a teacher, I'm a scholar, and I also write books, history books and songs. I'm a songwriter, singer-songwriter as well. So I'm passionate about Puerto Rican history and passionate about communicating Puerto Rican history to Puerto Ricans of all walks of life, because sometimes I'm concerned that there's very amazing information that is only discussed among academics, and we need to, it's about time that we communicate.
Why is that
to the rest? That's a very good question. I'm not sure why, but because there were very good books for high school back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, but the way we teach high school is how we communicate Puerto Rican history in high school. I think that's where the big problem is. Look at my library, I'm full of Puerto Rican history books, and there's more over here. But most people, I just can't share these books because they're just too academic, So it's about time we find a way to talk casually like we're doing here and hablar arroz con habichuela, ¿verdad? There's initiatives that are happening right now that are slowly trying to do that. And so that's going to be my focus. I'm going to try to begin with the information that might be more common and build from there. People, obviously, among the dates people remember Puerto Rican history is 1898, right? 1898 is the change of sovereignty, the American invasion, when Puerto Rico stops being Spanish and begins being under U.S. rule, right? An American colony.
Thank you for calling it an invasion.
Yeah,
it's throwing it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. 1898, right? And another date that might sound very familiar to more Puerto Ricans, right? Unfortunately, not as much as we would want, but 1868, El Grito de Lares is something everyone at least has heard about in some way or the other, right? So it's 68, 98. It's 30 years. I'm going to share a timeline I made. So hopefully that can help. Vamos a ver. Share screen, exactamente. Share screen. And I'm going to open this. Okay, vamos a ver. Share screen. Okay, give me a second. I mean, people have imagination. I count that they don't need visual guides, but it's never.
It helps. I mean, those that know something about would can figure. Wait a minute, there are significant gaps.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lot of people say Haiti started it all, which I do agree. Mm-hmm. But between Haiti and Grito Lares, there's still a gap of quite a few years of, I mean, decades, almost 100 years, isn't it?
Yeah. And wow, Haiti, I wish I could spend an hour.
We'll bring you back and we can do that. You want me to put that screen on?
Yeah, please. So I hope, can people see that?
Yeah, it's big. Okay. I see it over here. We can see it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, 1898 is the date that might be most familiar for most people. It ends almost 400 years of Spanish rule and begins U.S. Colonial rule over Puerto Rico, 1898. It's also interesting that you brought this in a wider American scope, right? In all of the Americas. Well, most colonies in the New World had accomplished their independence in early 19th century or the 1800s. By the 1820s, Brazil was free from Portugal, Haiti was free from France, Dominican Republic was already out of Spanish control, and Mexico, Peru, Venezuela, Colombia,
That was the war of Copotillo, is it? Capotillo?
El grito de
Capotillo, I think it was something like that.
Dominican Republic has several wars of independence, so
okay.
I think that happens when Spain reconquers the Dominican Republic. That's a very interesting story, but it's a little bit complicated. So generally speaking, by the 1820s, Spain only had two colonies, Cuba and Puerto Rico, okay? Because they were strategic and highly militarized possessions. So they were very difficult to follow the process that had been successful in the continental Spanish American empire, right? So 98, can you see the mouse?
Yep.
Okay, 98, American invasion, right? 30 years before, Grito de Lares, which is the most important revolution against Spanish rule. Not the only one, not the first, but definitely the most important one. And it's not the last, as we will see. So Grito de Lares was led by El Padre de la Patria, the father of the Puerto Rican nation, El Doctor Ramón Metarces. Absolutely. Let me show a picture of him over here, right? That's him. He's a doctor from Cabo Rojo, although he worked a lot in Mayagüez. It's really the most patriotic area of Puerto Rico.
Quick question: most of our founding fathers, right? Being from where is it at? From right here.
Yeah.
There we go. A lot of them were born into money, right?
Yes, Betances was the son.
I'm not taking anything away from them, but
yeah,
they had that advantage.
Yes, absolutely. Which is because they had more access to education, and perhaps that, well, having more access to education and economic resources helped them plan a revolution. So it's elements that are useful for the revolution. He was the son of slave owners, but he freed his slaves. He was against abolition of slavery. And Otto was also into wealthy family, Ottos as well, from Mayagüez, Ribelvis from Hormigueros, and Grito Lares is from this area. So this area is the most intense area of Puerto Rico because it's also the area where the Taínos led the revolution. Grito Lares was from here. La Intentona De Yauco is also from this area. Everything patriotic Ponce did is because it feeds from this tradition, right? So this area is like the patriotic front of Puerto Rico, from Lares to Cabo Rojo to Ponce, Guánica, San Germán, right? So 98. Oh, also very important. During this time, coffee becomes our number one product, and that is important because coffee is less oppressive than sugar. To work on sugar, the exploitation was higher than in coffee, and coffee was less oppressive in the sense that the work was not as backbreaking, and also small business and small families.
As a jibarito, a lot of people say that until they get bit by a fire ant.
You're true.
Where there's coffee, there's fire ants. All my farmers out there, you know that.
So I say it's less backbreaking, but it's still a lot of work. You're absolutely right. So from 68 to 98, coffee surpassed sugar, and it was probably our best moment economically under Spanish rule. It wasn't perfect, but it also makes Yauco and Ponce and Guánica and all these places feel more confident that they can be an independent country because.
But was that money? I'm sorry to cut you. Was that money going straight back to Spain, or was it circulating within the island somehow or another?
both it was circulating enough to, but also limited by Spanish restrictions. So they were
That's
saying
kind of like what we're going through right now.
absolutely. And after 1898, coffee went collapse. Coffee collapsed because of the American invasion. There was a earthquake, a hurricane as well, 1898, but it dropped from being number one to being almost insignificant during decades. The coffee industry. So part of the American invasion was to focus only on sugar, right? As the only crop. So coffee is important for the trade, for the self-confidence that Puerto Rico had of having an economy that could work, and it's important for Yauco and for Ponce as well. The two other dates is 87 and 97. I'm going to try to stay with only 4 dates today because it's helpful to economize information, not too much. So 4 dates. 98 and 68 are the most famous ones. You can attach the year before. 97 is the event called La Intentona de Yauco. Some people don't like that name because they think the name was intentionally chosen. Intentona. It doesn't ring a bell to us today because that word's not used anymore. But back then, Intentona was like
it tried, but it failed.
Yeah. It's like saying the epic fail of Yauco, you know? It's like it's slightly mocking it, right? So we don't see it like that anymore. So I don't have anything personal against the word intentona because it has been decontextualized. But others prefer the name El Grito de Yauco.
I've heard that, yes.
Yeah. So I think the word is less important from understanding the event, right? So as long as we understand what happened, we can use the word whichever way. Like the dona has already become like the coined phrase, right? So and also okay, let's see. I want people to imagine that there's 2 movements happening in Puerto Rico since 1868. Can you guys see me too, or only?
Yeah, we can see you. We can see what you have on your screen.
Okay, but you can see me as I talk, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Well, 68 and 98 is also 68 is also the moment in which Puerto Ricans divide the patriotic movement to improve the island, right? Betances chooses the road of revolution, and others like Valdoriotti, Roman Valdoriotti Castro, choose the road of reform. Okay.
What do you mean by reform? Or what did they mean by reform?
They believe that violence was revolution was risking too much violence and would not work or would be too painful. And they believe that Puerto Rico could become more democratic and less colonial by gradually improving our situation under Spanish rule. And it's an eternal debate. It has been in many countries, which is the best road. Some people alternate from revolution to reform. Some people see revolution as it's an unending debate. It happens everywhere. But Betances was firm in revolution, and Valdoriotti was firm in the reform, right? Also, their goals are different. They have a lot in common, by the way. They do want democracy. They do want abolition of slavery. They want a government of Puerto Ricans by Puerto Ricans.
Right.
But the revolutionaries want independence.
Of course.
Create the Republic of Puerto Rico. The reformists want an autonomic government, sort of like what Canada has with Great Britain today, in which Canada never became independent. Canada has a queen. The Queen of England is also the Queen of Canada. But the government of Canada is in the hands of Canadians, right? So these two groups are parallel. They can't talk to each other that much because that would sabotage their plans. Sometimes they're a bit bitter. The revolutionaries can be like disappointed with the reformers, saying, man, the revolution could triumph if you only gave us more support, right? And the reformists can be, not always, but sometimes they can be bitter with the revolutionaries, saying, you give us a bad name because they believe patriots, Puerto Rican patriots, are terrorists because of your faults, right?
Let me
So
be the devil's advocate real quick.
yeah,
If we would have
go ahead.
beaten Spain and beaten the Americans, would
Mhm.
we be fighting ourselves right now?
That's a good question. Civil wars, unfortunately, have been very common across uh, all countries that become independent after from European rule. The United States,
Yeah.
Brazil, Dominican
Right.
Republic. Um,
Countries
but
in
that
Africa
happens.
too.
Yes, yes, and Europe that seems so stable and so prosperous today. Oh, Europe has had civil wars all the time, so I think that's part of the growing pains, right? Hopefully, it can be avoided, but um, to I think it's part of the process, right? So 87 and 97 are also two dates in which the reformists and the revolutionaries, um, both movements create something important. Okay, um, let us see. 87. I'm going to show you 87. The reformists did this in Ponce. They made el Partido Autonomista Puertorriqueño, ¿verdad? In Ponce, led by Valerio de Castro, and these are the politicians, right? One of the first political parties in Puerto Rico. They had just abolished slavery through reform, so they were happy that there were some accomplishments, and they were hoping Puerto Rico could become a a sovereign country without separating from Spain. Um, the crazy thing is that that was granted in 1897, 10 years later. Okay, so that is part of the story from 1987 to 97 is basically the 10-year process of creating a reformist party that wants autonomy for Puerto Rico. And 97 is when it's granted la Carta Autonómica, just before the American invasion. So it's it's frustrating for the reformist effort that
Hmm.
after they accomplished that, less colonial treatment from Spain. In fact, they claimed that we were no longer a colony. We were under Spanish rule, but we had so much self-rule that it was no longer colonial, to lose it all with the American invasion, right? So at the same time, this was happening, el Partido Autonomista en Puerto Rico, La Torre del Viejo became a thing, well, or at least the existence of La Torre del Viejo came to be known. Now, there's different interpretations of what it was, but we can clarify some things that are evident. It was a secret organization,
Hmm.
very secret, very secret. Apparently, they didn't even write documents, fearing that that only made it easier for the Spanish authorities to discover their plots if
Hmm.
any of those documents are found. So, La Torre del Viejo was a secret organization, or one of the many secret organizations. And what they did, the most famous thing they did was boycott. Okay, boycott um, the Spanish merchants and business that had preferential treatment in the island. So Puerto
Hmm.
Ricans that were in a moment of economic growth realized that they had reached their limit because the government made colonial laws that restricted Puerto Ricans in their economy in favor of Spanish people that were living in the island and had all the advantage. So La Torre del Viejo made a very successful boycott, which was still a new thing. Boycotts are named after an Irish patriot that tried to apply the same.
Let
Uh,
me can we
yeah,
retract a little bit just for a quick
yeah,
second? They were boycotting goods,
yes,
right?
yeah,
How much was the island importing at the time, especially since it was in an agricultural high?
yeah. That's a good question. I don't have those facts with me. I don't manage them yet. All I
Okay.
can say is that, by the way, Ponce is too high here. Ponce should be, yeah, here. Ponce's port had surpassed San Juan. Some some place I heard that Ponce was like 40% of the of the importations, more than 40% importations and exportations in the islands were done in Ponce. San
Because
Juan
of
was,
Guanica, and back then it was all known as Ponce, correct?
well, Guanica was part of Yauco,
Yauco.
but
Okay.
the thing is, unlike San Juan, when San Juan was the top port, they had 90% of the exportations and importations. When Ponce was the number one port, once they passed that to that number one position, Ponce has like 40% because it's more distributed across different towns. When Ponce was number one, San Juan was number two, but the decentralization of the island was very convenient for Yauco, for Juan Diaz, for Arecibo to flourish. So Yauco was growing so much that sometimes I feel that Yauco could surpass Ponce had things remained the same, right? Or could have equaled Ponce. So Ponce was number one, but Yauco was getting every day closer to be the next Ponce in terms of amount of money that was moved, amount of trade, amount of activity. Juan Diaz also had a glorious moment. Also, the interior of the island was growing. Many towns grew or were founded during that time in the interior because of it was an exciting moment between 68 and 98, right? And La Torre del Viejo apparently was doing boycotts. There are some there's very little we know for certain about La Torre del Viejo, and some believe that Torre del Viejo was also revolutionary, was not only doing boycotts. They were planning to do the revolution and fight for independence. That might be true, or that might be an accusation from the Spanish government in order to persecute them. So was La Torre del Viejo always revolutionary? I don't know. It might have been. Or they might have become revolutionary because Spain forced them, basically because they were persecuted.
Like
but
they forced everybody else.
Like they forced everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a big thing, but the crazy thing is that this is public and Spain doesn't like it because it's the Spanish parties. The Spanish were a minority in Puerto Rico, Spanish living in the island, and they were used to having the monopoly of control of political parties in Puerto Rico. They were threatened by, they felt threatened by politically by Partido Autonomista Puertorriqueño, and they felt threatened also economically by the boycott La Torre del Viejo was doing, which was incredibly efficient, right? And then came this dude, Palacios, that same year, Governor Palacios, who was led to believe that los autonomistas were revolutionary and that La Torre del Viejo and the autonomistas were the same thing and independentistas were the same thing, and basically they're all radical extremists that must be hunted down. So 1887 is the year of three important things: El Partido Autonomista, La Torre del Viejo. So there you go, reformist, revolutionary, right? Or clandestine in some way, right? Rebellious or illegal. And the Spanish response is Los
Compontes, motherfuckers.
Yeah, it was awful.
I'm so glad on when we set up the YouTube channel that I put this is not apt for minors. Motherfuckers. Talk about the goddamn. Go ahead. Yeah.
They deserve that
that moniker,
that intro,
because they were horrendous.
Let me take a quick second for those of you who are watching us right now. For those of you who will watch this video further along on the replay, this is literally some Mel Gibson movie shit. What you guys are about to hear, what the Compontes would do, just prepare yourselves.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It was crazy. Some of the tortures, including using nails on a rod that would circulate and like this, and they would tie people's hands and force them to go between those rods with nails. So the nails would
they were using the same I may be off a little bit, but the same torture methods and machines that the church was using, and like the Inquisition and the hunting of the witches and all that shit?
Well, I
Because
would
they
have
had
to,
like specific machines to
yeah.
pull and quarter or to pull something out rolling. And what you said, I think I saw in a documentary once about that.
I would
Well,
have
I
to.
don't think
Yeah.
I don't think it's a stretch. Because I mean, all that was happening in Europe. Spain is in Europe, so if
Yeah.
not, directly coming from that, some sort of technological evolution from that, I don't think it's a stretch. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, there's a thing that's also well, they certainly seem medieval, or as you might say, as he just said, it might be an evolution of a medieval torture device. Another one was in which they would force people to touch their shoulders with a string, right? But in their backs, right? Something that is in that you can't do. Human
Right.
man
That'll
is
crack your
not.
clavicle.
Yeah. So they would use strings or to stretch people's arms to have their shoulders touch each other and sometimes cross the shoulders, and it would damage your body completely. And other horrendous things. They would tie people upside down, hanging them from their testicles. They would they would hang people upside down as well to be hit by like a piñata with rods and clubs.
All because they wanted to control their own destiny.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's crazy. They hunted down people that were actual independentistas, that wanted independence for Puerto Rico, and people that were never independentista, that were just reformists. So the person that was moderate, you might turn him into a radical because of this,
Yeah.
So if and many of them left the island, and some of them went to New York and went to find the organizations Betances had left there, and they started saying, "Well, we tried reforms, but
where in New York exactly? Do we know the exact spot?
No, I don't. Well, the names of the places are known, but I don't manage New York geography. But we can talk about New York for a moment. Betances, Belvis, and others had organized revolutionary movements in New York.
You want me to share your screen?
Yeah. Can you still see it or not?
Here we go.
Okay. I'm going to share it now. This group, el Partido Revolucionario Cubano, Sección de Puerto Rico. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, that group is basically the one Betances had organized years before. Let me show you Betances. We talked about him. Okay. Okay. Let me stay. Okay. Ahí estamos. Partido Revolucionario Sección de Puerto Rico. Because the Cubans between 68 and 98 fought 3 wars of independence. When the Grito de Lares happened, the Cubans made a Grito de Yara, which led to a war of 10 years. And then there were other wars that occurred later on. So Betances was always in connection with Dominicans and Cuban revolutionaries, right? To help each other. And in New York, the Partido Revolucionario Cubano was like the culmination of years of revolutionary organization, the unity of Cubans and Puerto Ricans to fight for independence. And they had a Puerto Rican section led by this dude called ENA, right? Henna, ENA, doctor from Ponce, right? And he was basically the person Betances trusted the most in New York. The revolutionary Betances trusted to be the leader because Betances was getting older. Betances was living in Paris in the 1890s. So ENA basically in the 1890s ended up being the leader of the Puerto Rican revolutionaries. Okay, so in the 1890s, there's a war in Cuba, an intense war, and el Partido Revolucionario Cubano is organized in New York with a Puerto Rican section, and they're trying to bring the war to Puerto Rico. Let me show you a book I have.
Yes, please.
They have awesome generals like this dude, Juan Riestra, which is a highly experienced Puerto Rican general.
Mhm.
that fought the 3 wars of independence in Cuba. So it's important to understand that for many Puerto Ricans, the War of Independence of Cuba and Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic were one and the same.
Was he
Uh,
the one that was sent to Cuba after something didn't work here? Or am I
Okay.
mistaking him with somebody else?
I think you're talking about Lluveras, right? Matei Lluvera.
Okay, yes. Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I kind of
Okay.
like went forward a couple of decades.
Okay.
He does that.
But no. You're in the right decade. We're in the 890s now. We
Okay.
saw the 60s, we saw the 80s, 87, and now we're in the 90s, right? And in the 90s, Cubans are in a war, the last war of independence for Cuba. And many Puerto Ricans go to Cuba and fight in Cuba. Many Puerto Ricans die in Cuba. Hundreds fight there. So it's and when you compare to the rest of the history of America, it makes perfect sense, because Venezuela was freed by people from modern day Colombia, which was called New Granada back then, right? And vice versa, because Spain fought back. The empire strikes back, right? Several times.
Right.
So sometimes when one colony's revolution fails, the people from another colony goes. Chile was freed by Argentinians. Peru was freed by Chileans. So it's a beautiful.
It's easier to flank the enemy in when you're attacking from both sides. Thinking like a martial artist, you just grab him head by head, you're giving him a 50-50 chance. You grab an angle and you have numbers, he's a goner.
It's like applying that logic continental wise. Absolutely.
Yes.
And
It's pretty much the main strategy that, like, not to get too off topic, but Simon Bolivar, that's basically what he was doing.
Yeah.
But he wanted to start with one country, and by the time he died, they called him the Great Liberador. He liberated like
yes, absolutely. And Dominican Republic, as you guys know, was reconquered by Spain.
Yeah.
And the United States tried to take over Dominican Republic more than once. So Betances was
really
very clear. Yes.
I had no idea.
Yeah, in 1869, after Grito Lares, it's a crazy thing. And then they invaded Dominican Republic for like 14 years in the 1920s, and Haiti as well. So Betances was clear: independence is not enough. We need independence and unity, because Spain will try to reconquer us if we are separated, right? So and it's important to know that, because if not, it seems that Cuba had a war and Puerto Ricans did not, right? And as has been studied, some of the people that were training Puerto Ricans to fight were 2 Cuban brothers. So Spain would use that and say, you see that? Puerto Ricans don't want to free themselves from Spanish rule. They're happy with Spain. This is infiltration, the crazy Cubans that have infiltrated Puerto Rico. Do you know? So people try to say Cuba's the rebel and Puerto Rico is happy with Spain. So and it's important to remember that many Puerto Ricans were fighting in Cuba and died in Cuba. So our war of independence is the Cuban War of Independence. Because if not, El Grito de Yauco, what seems another failure, like Lares was a failure, Yauco was a failure. So what the heck? Maybe Puerto Ricans didn't want that. No, that's not the case. The case is that we are already fighting a war. Cuba and Lares do not represent a failed attempt of Puerto Rican revolutionary activity. No, it's an active Puerto Rican revolutionary activity that is being fought in Cuba, and it is moving also in Puerto Rico. And they try to bring Cubans to join, and Puerto Ricans exiles in Cuba and in New York to enter through Guanica. It was part of the plan. Enter through Guanica and make an uprising, a combination of an uprising and an invasion, of really an expedition for liberation of Puerto Rico, right? So that was part of the painful debate. This dude wanted to do that because he's from Mayagüez, but at some point he said, you know what, I can't bring troops to Guanica unless the revolution begins first, the uprising. So there was a lot of internal debate on whether should we
Because it'll look like an invasion on their half, also.
Yes, absolutely.
There's almost no point in doing. There's almost no point in doing it if you don't have the.
Yeah, why am I going to defend you si tú no estás ni esquivando las pescosas? Si la recibes porque te gusta.
Yeah.
Exactly. Almost as important as the general and the colonels and the troops is the PR guy. You got to make the war look like a. You want this war, guys. Trust me. You got to have that before anything.
Because Spain had a lot of propaganda and spies everywhere. Spain had an excellent, efficient spy network. So they really, they had a hard time. In fact, the leaders, it was so critical. It's not because they were hating each other. It's just that they loved the country so much that they felt that the wrong decision would, too much is at stake to let someone you think has a bad idea go forward with it. So eventually he had to go to Cuba, and he said, people need me in Cuba, and people are dying in Cuba. So
keep holding it up. I'm gonna put the camera on you real quick so people can see who it is.
Juan Riestra Rivera. This is an excellent book written by Felix Ojeda Reyes, who is also the top scholar on Betances, right? So this guy, ideally, had things been slightly different, this is the guy that was going to land in Guanica. Okay. There's another thing that is a bit complicated, but maybe I can talk a little bit more about it some other time.
A bit more complicated. I can check this out. I can fully understand now why the Caribbean loves novelas. Yeah. Our fucking history is a goddamn novela from beginning to end, bro.
Yeah.
Ooh, all right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But because we are the most the most geopolitically, strategically important area of the entire North and South American continents. So every empire has an interest in the Caribbean. Think about it. In the Caribbean, empires are born and empires die. Where did the Spanish Empire, where was it born? In the Caribbean. Where was the American Empire born? In the Caribbean. Where did the most radical revolutions occur? The one in Haiti, in the Caribbean, the one in Cuba, in the Caribbean. World War III almost happened in the Caribbean with the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, North America is basically English-speaking, South America is Spanish and Portuguese. But the Caribbean, you have the French, the Dutch, the Swedish had colonies, the Danish had colonies. So the Caribbean is very, very complicated because of that, right? So empires, it's the battlefield of empires, the Caribbean, right? For a single island, Martinique, San Martin to this day is divided between two countries, Netherlands and France, right? So a little island that is, I don't know, it might be as big as Culebra or something like that.
Wow.
It's divided by two countries, yeah?
And it was the same with the Dominican Republic and Haiti.
Absolutely.
Once upon a time, it was Hispaniola, and then one day it got sliced in half. One belongs to the French, one to the Spanish. Fast forward today, one is DR, one is Haiti.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
You can't get along. Okay, uno para un cuarto, el otro para el otro. No hablan más nada.
So that's why Betances said the solution is the Confederacy of the Antilles, la Confederación Antillana. Let's be Antillano, right? And he wanted to create that identity. And identity is here, right? It's here and here. And when you have people dying, Puerto Ricans dying, giving their lives for Cuba, I mean, that proves that it was a real thing. La identidad antillana. So, however, not everyone agreed. This is where it becomes a bit complicated. There were some Puerto Rican independentistas, separatistas, that wanted to separate from Spain, that hoped that after separating from Spain, they could join the United States as a state, okay? And this, you can find these people that are often called annexionistas because they want to be
quick question.
Yeah.
Becoming a state or statehood, quote unquote, doesn't mean the same now as it did back then, right? That's that. If you can just touch that a little bit, because that's something that I think everybody should know.
Maybe you mean it because the United States has become more centralized now. In the past, the United States had more autonomy for the states. The states government, the federal government was not that big. So some Puerto Ricans that aspired for more self-rule under Spain would say, you know what, we could have a lot of self-government and feel free within the Union of the United States. So statehood has become more centralized now than what it used to be. Another thing that was completely different is to be a territory. Back then, territories were on the road to become states. A territory was meant to be a state. Then
like a probation period.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Then they invented something else called unincorporated territories, which was basically an excuse for colonial behavior. So, and none of the unincorporated territory became a state because it's not the idea. They just want a land to use, not to treat them equally. You know, so they're into a lot of frustrations. Those that wanted Puerto Rico to join the U.S. will be incredibly frustrated because they admired the U.S. precisely because of their democratic tradition and Republican government. You know, and so it's like to be betrayed by your hero. You know. So some of these people were patriotic, especially Ana, the leader of the Puerto Ricans in New York. Ana was pro-statehood. Betances knew that. Betances did not like the idea, however. Betances said that's an awful idea. We will never be a colony of Spain nor the U.S. That's not the way to go. And he would criticize Ana.
Wasn't Ana put up there by Betances himself?
Yes, that's the crazy thing. Betances knew how to separate things. He said, I trust this dude. And Betances did not trust everyone. Betances was incredibly suspicious of any newcomers that would say, hey,
well, I mean, look at all that he was doing. I forgot at what podcast it was. You compared him to Bruce Wayne?
Yeah. Absolutely. Betances was the Bruce Wayne.
The Puerto Rican Batman.
Yeah, because he was like a doctor in the morning, and at night he would go to La Baticueva, right? The right?
La Baticueva.
Exactamente.
Ana was his Robin.
Yes. No, he was like the Batman of the East Coast and the Batman of the West Coast. It would be like something like that. So one in Paris and one in New York, each with their own Bruce Wayne and alter ego personality, right? They would go at night to traffic weapons, to trade people, to move revolutionary money and communication and recruit revolutionaries. So it was a very intense job. So Ana for me is a patriot, not because I know him personally, because Betances trusted him when he didn't trust others. So I think pro-statehood movement can learn from Ana, right? Some people want Puerto Rico to become a state. I certainly don't believe that. But I think that they could see in Ana a model of how to have a decolonizing patriotic agenda, and that is compatible with your Puerto Rican identity and patriotism, right?
Yeah, because we have such a mix. It's like sofrito. Sofrito is a mix of this, that, and the other, but it tastes like its own thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Us Borincanos, we are a mix of this, and this, but we are our own thing.
Absolutely. So Betances made an interesting exception with Ana. He didn't trust the Puerto Ricans that were annexionista, but with Ana said would trust him, right? So Ana is the leader in New York and in the ground, right? In Puerto Rico, who is the leader? Well, there's different accounts, right? One of these accounts is the person we mentioned a bit earlier, a guy from Yauco called Matei Lluvera. Absolutely. And for a lot of years, he took the credit, right? Is this guy?
Share your screen.
Please, can you share it?
Yeah, there you go.
It's Matei Lluvera. He was a wealthy merchant from Yauco, and he was the person that was trafficking 30,000 machetes for the revolution, and he was going to 30,000 machetes from Germany. There were some 500 rifles that were supposed to go to the revolution as well. So Matei Lluvera is.
Did they ever get to the island?
I understand that they did. I would like to. I just read that they did, but I would like to double check on that. Right? Apparently, they were in his almacén. How do you say almacén?
Warehouse.
Warehouse. Absolutely, yeah. And but he's a bit controversial because he believed in statehood. You see, so Betances didn't trust him. I read that Betances did not trust Mateo Lluera. I stopped sharing the screen for a second.
Yeah.
So I can focus on you guys. So the idea is that Mateo Lluera is most famously and most commonly called the leader of the movement, but apparently there's new studies that say that he was the intellectual author, but not the person that led the events of Yauco of March 1897. Also, he's called.
Lluvera? We're still talking about Lluvera?
Yeah. Lluvera is not the person that actually led the charge, and he was definitely the guy with the money, which is important for any revolution, right? Later on, Lluvera.
I asked because if you read 3 different books on it, you might get the same story, but in 3 different.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
One to give you a quarter, the other one to give you 5 nickels, the other one to give you 2. It's still a quarter.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
There's some extra change around.
Yeah. So how much you emphasize on what makes a big difference. Afterwards, Lluvera was joined el Partido Republicano Puertorriqueño, the pro-statehood party. He was mayor of Yauco. So he's more like a mainstream person that got an opportunity to enjoy some sort of power, right? Power, whichever power is possible under a colonial rule, right? But he was Yauco's lawyer.
Did he do it for political reasons, just in case the revolution worked? Or am I just being a dick about it?
It sounds like he was being a dick.
It's okay to say it.
He became a mayor after the American invasion. So,
yeah, that's not fishy.
Yeah, maybe. All I can say, Betances didn't trust him. But there's another person that seems less fishy and was the person that actually fought and led the people, and it's Fidel Vélez. That has been ignored for many years, right?
Guys, that's the face that you all see on the top right of your screen over there.
That's him.
That's the man right there.
And he was 33 when the events of Yauco occurred. And there's many interesting things about him. First of all, he lives in el barrio, or he had.
I'm sorry, hold on. Is that common at 33? Because now 33 years old, you're still a young dude. At 33, was it common to like be up there? You know, that time in movements and stuff.
It was a moment in life expectancy was shorter, right? So many. I think it's a good age to lead a revolution.
Okay.
Let me find. I want to share another screen for a moment because I want to show.
Because I can also understand the whole stardom early. My grandparents helped raise me, so I was building cement houses by the time I was 11.
Wow.
While other kids were going to the beach and running through the quebrada, I was, mira, hay que hacer una marquesina ahí a tu abuela, ponte a mezclar cemento.
Wow, that's the real deal.
Yeah, so I can understand if that's also the, you start early, not like today.
Mm-hmm.
Today they're 20-something years old and they're still.
Yeah,
that's another podcast. Let's share your screen.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is Yauco, and as you can see, there's Sosúa Alta, Sosúa Baja, and yeah, I think Yauco downtown should be right here. Sosúa is named after a river that is now called the Rio Loco, but apparently was called Sosúa by the Indians, right? By the Taino. And there's 2 other barrios there's 2 other municipalities that have a Sosúa as well. Guánica, which was part of Yauco back then, has also a barrio called Susua Baja. And Sabana Grande, this is Sabana Grande, also has a Susua. And north of Susua is La Torre, Barrio La Torre. So it's interesting to see, basically, the border between Yauco and Sabana Grande is defined by the Susuas in both sides. There's Susua on both sides of the river. And the interesting thing about La Torre is that, according to some accounts, okay, let me see. This is Yauco. This is Sabana Grande. La Torre is linked, according to some accounts, to La Torre del Viejo. And if this is true, then Vélez is more important than what most people realize. Fidel Vélez, sometimes called Vélez Rosas or Vélez de la Rosa. So there are different versions of his name, but I think the one that's most correct is Vélez.
At least in the family, that's the way I've always heard it. But I would have to check with my grandmother, and it was my grandfather that was directly related to him. But I can try to find out and get that information to you later on.
Because I'm researching right now about the ancestry of Vélez, Fidel Vélez, and it's, according to one account I read, his grandfather was involved in one of the first revolutions against Spain, one in San Germán. And there's a family in San Germán that is Vélez de la Rosa, or del Rosario, I don't remember which one. So maybe that's the full name from his grandfather's side that was shortened. And if that's true, then his ancestry is very, very interesting. But I'm going to leave that for another podcast, because I would have to research more on that.
We have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Wait, what's the difference between La Torre y La Torre del Viejo?
Okay, that's the thing. According to some accounts, La Torre is a barrio in Sabana Grande.
Right.
But the mysterious...
It's close to the natural forest, isn't it?
I'm not sure. I would have to check.
Somewhere around there, there's a there's a national forest.
Which is called Susua too, right?
Probably everything around there is called Susua.
So it might be, according to some accounts, La Torre del Viejo, that secret organization we talked about of 1897, is named after El Barrio La Torre. And if it's true, and according to some interpretations, Vélez was El Viejo de la Torre. La Torre del Viejo, he is El Viejo de la Torre. I wish I could find the evidence for that, because if we have evidence, that means he was not relevant only in 1897. He had a 10-year connection between those two very important dates. But it's so secret that it's very difficult to find evidence. But it's interesting. It would make more sense for me to hear.
Well, I know Spain definitely knew about him. He made some type of noise because I forgot exactly where I saw it. It was scans of the letters that the mayors were sending to Spain. And they said they had an insurgent called Fidel Vélez, and he was becoming a problem, quote unquote, un problema.
Okay.
So they definitely knew about him.
Okay, well, I would. Do you know from
what states? It's just really difficult to read that penmanship.
Yes.
It's really difficult.
What year was it?
It looked like it was still done literally with a feather.
Okay, but because,
and it was, I think, 1897, the year of the actual. Okay. It was a couple of months after the fight. I think it was.
Interesting. Well, if we're both doing additional research, you and I.
Yes.
Hopefully, we can elaborate more on that, because I'm dying to see if that's true, because that would be the connection between La Torre del Viejo, that according to some people was only about boycott, but according to others, It was about boycott and independence and revolution. And Vélez might be the link to that. Because we know the reformist actions in the island because they were public in Partido Autonomista between 87 and 97. The revolutionary actions, we know about them from the guys in New York because they were far away from Spanish control. But the ones in the island are super, super mysterious. And if we learn more about Fidel Vélez, we might know more about the revolution activity in the island in that crucial decade, 87, 97, right? And let's talk about what he did, right? On
Yes,
97.
please.
So 96, apparently, there was another Grito de Yauco, well, one before, 96. And Amatei Lluveras was imprisoned and eventually left the island.
What exactly did they attack in that one? Or was it the same plan?
Yeah.
Get the munitions, get their it was the munitions, and what else was it? It was like 3 specific spots they wanted to hit.
In 96?
No, in 97.
Oh, yes.
So the one in 96, was it the same targets?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I just, in fact, I'm not sure if I read the specifics.
Riestra, I'm always going to ask you the difficult questions. Just
sure, I don't
get
mind.
used to me, brother.
I don't mind. I'm dying to know. In fact, that makes it more exciting because it makes people know that it's still a mystery. We're still trying to find out. But I had heard before that there were also some revolutionary activities recorded in Arroyo, recorded in the east of the island, which is super interesting, and proof that Los Compontes did not end in 1887. 1887 is called the year of Los Compontes, the tortures and terrible things that happened. But that's the famous year of Los Compontes. Los Compontes became famous because Spain used it for many, many people. But Los Compontes were still being done secretly to revolutionaries that were caught, right? So there were some revolutionary activities in the 90s, in the East as well, in Arroyo. And in 96, there was some sort of fight. There was a fight between revolutionaries and La Guardia Civil Española and the troops, Spanish troops, and forced Amatei Lluveras to leave the island. So 97, Amatei Lluveras is in New York. 97, Fidel Vélez is leading a plan to begin the revolution in, I think it's November or December. Do you remember?
I think it was November.
That's the plan. The revolution is in November, and it's going to be an uprising. It's going to include an expedition with revolutionaries from New York and Cuba, Puerto Ricans and Cubans. But the Spanish authorities discover the plot months before. So it's like
was this, I'm sorry to interject again, but was this the noise that the Cubans were waiting for before they came in?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Because you said that earlier that they were waiting for something. Show me.
Yeah. Basically, yes. Because they wanted an uprising to happen, right? Ena was more flexible, the leader in New York, the Puerto Rican Ena, because he would say, ideally we'll do that, but if we can't, well, maybe it can work the other way around. Let's begin the expedition and hope people would rise up. But others would say, oh, it doesn't work both ways. It should be the uprising first, and right. So or simultaneous. That's another option. Simultaneous, right?
Which would seriously divide Spain, because didn't they depend a lot on their naval force? So that would divide them seriously.
Because they're also very busy with Cuba. So, and there were revolutionaries in Mayagüez. There were revolutionaries in San Germán, in Sabana Grande, in Yauco, in Guanica. There's a training camp. There's 2 Cuban brothers that are training people in I don't remember exactly where, but I have the name of the places. Maybe for the next podcast, I could tell you exactly the places and los barrios. But for now, let's focus on Fidel Vélez. This is very similar to what happened in Grito Lares. Grito Lares was supposed to be September 29th, and Spain found out on September 20th. So they were forced to begin the revolution only 3 days difference in 23, right? And but this is worse. This is worse because the revolution was supposed to be in November and they were discovered in early March. So Spain has a lot of space and time to find out the revolutionists and arrest them one by one. And that's when Fidel Vélez says, no, let's start this now, right away. And some important...
If they know we're coming, let's not make them wait.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah.
Might as well.
That reminds me of the Clash. There's a song that's called the Guns of Brixton. And say when they come at your door, the authorities, how you're going to go? With your hands on your neck or with the trigger of the gun, right? So they were saying they're gonna come back to get at me. Well, let's fight. So the revolutionaries knew that the plan was already on the verge of failure. They're not being.
Can we go a little Sopranos or a little Mafia for a second?
Yeah, go.
Who was the fucking rat?
Oh,
you know we were gonna go there.
Yeah. That's intense. This is very intense. There might be more than one.
We can leave that one for another podcast if you want. We can, because we spoke about that earlier. We can.
Yeah. There might be more than one. There was one dude that inspired some people trust, right? And others were saying, "Este me tiene cara de voluntario." Voluntario were the voluntary police or troops. So it's like saying this guy has he looks like a cop face, right? Tiene cara de guardia, no? And his name was Román. According to some accounts I read, his father was involved in Lares. And according to some accounts, his father was Venancio Román. Venancio Román was not only participating in Lares, he was killed in Lares, okay? So you would imagine that someone that's
wasn't he one of the ones that, I could be mistaken, that helped storm the alcaldía or something like that?
No
es un pendejo que murió al principio. El tipo peleó, cocoteó y hasta lo último.
En San Sebastián.
Okay.
When he was in Lares when they took Lares, and then he went to San Sebastián to fight in San Sebastián, and he was killed among the people with a flag. So that's intense. So a person like that, you would expect he is very committed because his father gave his life for the ideals. So you would not doubt from that person, right? But one of the companions of Fidel Vélez was like, I don't trust him. Get him out of here, right? And the night before, he disappeared. And according to some accounts, he is the person that informed. But there's things that are missing here. There are many gaps. If that account is true, then he informed the night before, but Spain already knew. So is he the snitch only that night, or is he the original snitch? Or is he just a suspicious person people thought was the snitch and wasn't, because spy activity is full of this.
He'd be what you call the fall
scapegoat.
guy.
Yeah, this a scapegoat, right, or something. So I'm yet to have a strong opinion on who is the snitch. I can only say this guy, at least to some of the participants, is the snitch. In the eyes of some of these participants, it's Román, and that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to have someone like him do that. In fact,
that lost his dad in what's considered by many the original battle, the one that started it all. Yeah, it didn't start it all, but a lot of people do consider it. It's It's one of the battles that's most heartfelt across the whole, Caribbean, across the whole La Antilla.
Yeah, absolutely.
You never guess that.
Yeah. Maybe that's the reason Spain chose him as an informant.
Yeah.
Okay, so El Chotio, if Fidel Velez said, fuck this, they know we're coming, let's get over there.
Absolutely.
That famous picture, I tried looking for it and I couldn't. You know which picture I mean, right?
Yeah.
Where you have it?
The picture with the flag? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. That more than deserves.
Let me show you share you one last anecdote in that direction. One of the revolutionaries that went to tell Fidel Velez not to do it was Roig, who was one of the patriots. He was not against Fidel Velez, but he was like, let's not do it. It's too risky. And another one I think was Felix Matos Bernier, who is involved in other revolutionary activities. But Fidel Velez would not be convinced. He would say, I imagine what he's thinking is, we've worked so hard for this. We're not going to go silently. We're going to, if there's any hope, we're going to spark it, and perhaps others would join. But if it's all going to clash and come down, we're not coming down without a fight.
That makes sense. I'm going by cellular information, the generations of the bloodline going down, and all that side of the family that I know, from myself to my father to my grandparents and so on. We're like that. We are all like that. If there's a problem, don't tell me to wait till tomorrow to solve it. I have to solve it now. So the latter makes more sense to me. That he's like, let's fucking go. Once again, I'm only going by the way me and my family are, and knowing that we share that lineage. To me, it just makes sense.
Wow. It fits the description I've heard about him. Yeah, the description, that personality. Wow. So they decide to attack March 20. 20. Not was it March? I forgot the date right now.
15 wasn't.
I have it here.
Please do.
Yes. We need to get this straight because it's such an important date. So I'm glad we're discussing all the context, because without the context, people that want to fight Puerto Rican patriotic initiatives will simply say it was just a small group of people. It didn't succeed. It's the 24th of March. 24th of March. So whatever happens, the 24th of March, 1897, has to be interpreted as a sample of something that is bigger. It's like the tip of an iceberg, just like El Grito Lares. If El Grito Lares managed to convoke 1,000 Puerto Ricans, that means it was going to be several thousands, because only the people from Mayagüez and Lares were able to attend an emergency meeting, because it was that is the importance of what happens on the.
And he collected his men as he went along, right? As he marched.
Absolutely. And apparently there were hundreds, and they were armed with guns and with machetes that they had been training for time. Okay, so
that's another piece of information I'd like to find more about. I learned in something that I read that he actually trained the troops.
Really?
He actually trained them combat, and that's what he had the land for.
That conversation, as far as that goes, that he trained them, that he had the land for, that's basically the spark that started this whole thing, Joey. Like,
wow. That started Torre del Viejo. Yeah, it was that.
It started Torre del Viejo. It started, you know what? Maybe we should do a podcast. Like, it literally, like, it was that conversation. Like, hey, John, do you remember that thing I told you about? With they probably told him how to fight with machetes and stuff. Yeah.
I also read that same horse, the white horse that comes out in the infamous picture, he used to go to the pueblo and to the plaza and stand on the back and start preaching to people.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I'll try to find because it was es tan regado.
Sí.
It's like, let me not just tell you, let me tell everybody who's watching this. This is not I'm not a historian. I'm just regular dude, MMA coach. You know what I mean? I love my coffee, just a regular dude. And trying to study up on this and find all this information is a real pain in the ass. And earlier on with Riestra and with John, we were speaking that there seems to be, it's like if you put everything in chronological order, there seems to be a gap. And it's not that you, check it out, it's not like you can't get a teaspoon of pepper. It's that the teaspoon of pepper was sprayed over a plate of rice and you got to pick them out one by one. One by painful fucking one. And it is so difficult. It is so difficult. Riestra, back to you.
Yes. This might help. The Cuban brothers that were involved in the training, Jose Budet Rivera, Manuel Budet Rivera. I'm sure that there has to be someone that made a thesis, doctoral thesis or something. So when you can't find books, this is one of the few books on the matter, right? That I found in the UPR of Ponce, thanks to a friend of mine, Silvia Rossi, that called the University of Ponce and they scanned it for me. So just a few days ago. So that's amazing.
Nice.
But sometimes when you can't find an important topic, then you say, why isn't there a book on this? There are good theses that are not published. So sometimes I hope that soon I can go to the UPR of Rio Piedras and see who has made thesis on this topic. Okay? Probably there's a scholar listening. If you have information, let us know. Let us know. We all are all wanting. No one here is claiming to be the expert on this. And if I've said something that is a mistake, please correct me. I'm super okay with that. I'm not like trying to defend my interpretation. My interpretation is not fixed yet. I'm still trying to learn. So if anyone hears and knows anything, let us please communicate with us. So the 24th of March, they gather people as they go, and near the cemetery, the police, the Spanish forces, the troops were already waiting for them. Some troops from Yauco went to Guanica. Some troops from Ponce moved to Yauco before, so they were ambushed. Many people were wounded. Some people died of their wounds later on. Many were arrested. And there were other attacks that happened later on. Another person called Quiñones that led another group also attacked. I'm not familiar with all the details. We're going to leave that for another. The idea is that there is a fighting. There is shooting. There is clash. It's not a huge battle. We have to understand it's not fair to compare this with the events in Cuba because it is a single revolution, and this is a revolution. This is an event that tells us that the revolution was being prepared here, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. So there were several clashes that day, and perhaps the day
there were more deaths due to the Intentona De Yauco afterwards than while it happened. Because as far as I've been able to, it could be they just wanted to romanticize it. I read there was only one guy shot. Fidel grabbed him, put him on the horse.
Correct. I heard that too.
Llegó hasta Ay Bonito, is it? I think it was. Met up with somebody there. Adjuntas. They took him down to the south where he met a mason who had his own vessel, and then they were able to take him out to San Tomas.
Absolutely.
Yes,
I heard that too. But
I wish I would have paid this much attention in school, but go ahead.
But you're right. They say that no one was killed, but there were people killed afterwards. Some of
his brothers, right?
2 of his brothers. That's dramatic, man. If you think about that, well, they arrested his wife. His family was arrested. So a lot of
Doña Natalia Bonilla Vega, right?
Vega, exactamente, who apparently was also muy brava as well.
Oh yeah, well, our family, we love brava women. That's like that. We love brava women. But okay, the flag that was put in the air, was it sent from New York or did she make it?
That's an amazing question. Wow, that's a very good question.
Like I said, all I have are bits and pieces, and I'm gonna be honest, more from the family than from books.
Okay, what I heard up to a month ago is that the flag was designed or was approved by the Revolutionary Committee in New York. There's a famous date in 1895 when it was approved. When it was designed is less easy to pinpoint, but
really,
yeah, there's different accounts on when was it designed. But it's like ideas. You sometimes don't remember exactly when the idea, for example, for this podcast, the exact date it happened, right?
Right.
So the flag itself is super important because it reminds us it's a single revolution. Cuba and Puerto Rico, it's a single revolution. It's a reminder. Just like the old flag was Dominican version of the Puerto Rican version of the Dominican flag. The Grito de Lares was a sister flag of Dominican Republic. The current flag,
they all derive from Haitian, right? From the Haitian.
Absolutely. That's the other thing. The Haitian connection is there. I'm glad you bring that up. So
I did my pre-show studying.
Yeah, Haiti. We need to talk more about Haiti. Definitely.
Yeah.
So the flag was made there, and I heard this dude, Matei Lluveras, smuggled the flag along with machetes and guns, which is cool because there's something cool about that narrative.
Yes.
Smuggle a flag. You're not.
Can you imagine being that person that opens the crate that first time to find brand new machetes, rifles, and a flag folded? Holy shit! Yo me meto a pelear también. Anybody? Vamos matarnos.
And if no one told you about the flag, you would see it and understand. You would say like, "Hey, this looks like a Cuban flag, but it's not." Oh, I know what it is.
Shit got real.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but according to this narrative, this book is written by Rubén Collado Salazar. Okay, according to this book, it's the other version you just mentioned. It was the Vélez family. It was his wife and the mother of his wife, Sebastiana Bonilla, si mal no recuerdo, ¿verdad? That wove the flag. Probably there were many flags. Some of them were smuggled, and the other ones were made there.
Because as far as I've been able to collect, both from the family and reading, all the stories that I've been able to collect have the same thing in common. She gave him the flag.
Wow. Amazing.
Here, es tiempo de. I have a quick question. I want to go back to what we were talking about. I have a quick question. Did Doña Natalia hold the fort while Don Fidel was in exile? Meaning, while he was in exile, did she hold it down for him? Did she keep the fort?
Okay, what I heard was that she was arrested too. And later on came the announcement that Spain granted Puerto Rico autonomy.
So ella fue la que le avisó a Fidel, right? She's the one who let Fidel know while he was in St. Thomas.
Absolutely, that's what I heard. That's what
people, all of this shit, and without email. This is something we gotta fucking look at. There was no email for them.
Yeah. And originally, she was trying to inform him that there was an amnesty. There was an amnesty that the Spanish government realized that to continue arresting.
Well, they still arrested him when he got there, didn't they?
Yes. So that's why he was hesitant. According to this book,
narrative.
He was.
If it's the book, I think you could have just let me know. I have a copy right here.
Oh, really? The same one?
My grandmother sent it to me. Yeah.
Wow. This was published in the 100th anniversary. So, he was in jail during the American bombardment of Puerto Rico. So, could you imagine that you're in jail in Old San Juan and you hear 3 hours of nonstop
I was gonna say
bombardment.
that same shit. He could have gotten hit with shells, right? They were
Yeah,
just bombarding
yeah.
a lo loco. Whatever they hit, they hit.
Yeah.
Fuck it, right?
And people died during that bombardment. So that's
You
crazy,
know what?
right?
That's part of his. That's something in history that I have not heard a lot about. That bombardment. They came, they bombarded, and then now it's this is the flag, and they kind of like leave it cut and dry like that.
Yeah, it was completely unnecessary. The invasion begins in July 1898, and the bombardment was in May, March 1898. So it's a crazy thing there. But going back to the flag.
Yes, please.
We take it for granted. The Puerto Rican flag was something illegal until 1952. So it was illegal for Spain. It was illegal for the American rule as well. We had no flag until 1952. So to imagine that the first time that flag is unfurled is right before a battle, wow, it makes you look at that flag differently, right?
Yes.
And the people that rose to power afterwards, when the Americans took over, the political parties in Puerto Rico were led by people that were not revolutionaries, that did not participate in La Intentona De Yauco, nor El Grito del Are, nor in Betances revolutionary activity. So these were people that were reformists. So they had no reason to feel any attachment to that flag. For it, just to give you a comparison, when the flag was made, also a coat of arms was made, and that coat of arms, yes, a coat of arms.
You gotta get me that. I haven't seen that.
I'm gonna show you a picture.
Yes, please.
I'll send it to you. But I want you to compare the narrative. Well, you did not know that exists. I did not know that existed until recently. So why is it that the flag became the symbol for all Puerto Ricans and not the coat of arms? It had something special happen, because the flag could have had the same fate as the coat of arms. It could have been an obscure thing made by a radical minority that failed the revolution. So it doesn't represent the majority of Puerto Ricans, you see? So for me, it's interesting to see that the flag prevailed, and the people that were never revolutionary, the flag is revolutionary to begin with. The flag is revolutionary.
And though people don't want to accept it, as long as they, where is it at? On this side. As long as they fly this flag to represent Puerto Rico, no matter what their status may be, no matter what political party they may think they belong to, they're still committing an act of revolution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, and guys, everybody who's watching this, understand this. It hasn't even been 100 years yet since it's been legal to fly this up there.
Yeah. And so many years have happened in between the first time they unfurled it and the moment they legalized. Why didn't they make up a new flag? They could have made a flag for Estado Libre Asociado. If it's true that the revolutionaries are a minority of radicals that are not relevant for the Puerto Rican history, most Puerto Ricans were into autonomy or reformist movements, not revolutionary. If that was completely true, then why do we have the flag of the revolutionary then?
Maybe it's Muñoz Marin's guilty conscience. Oops.
Could be.
Oops.
So that makes me think that something that's impossible for us to know, how much support did the revolution have among average Puerto Ricans, the pueblo, la gente. It's impossible to know because we won't be able to make a statistic or a poll or anything. It was not legal back then. It didn't happen afterwards. But it tells you something. The flag tells us something. El Grito de Yauco tells us something. One night, de una noche para otra, he gets hundreds of people to join him. That God only knows how many people would have joined, had the plan.
I read something.
Well, yeah.
We don't know, we weren't there, but you would know better than I. I read that you were either with them, or you stayed in your house, or you got cut down. Those were the three options on that march. You literally lock yourself in your house until it's done, or you march with us, or you said that earlier, the word, because I read this somewhere else, that exact word, voluntario.
Uh,
Tú eres
wow.
voluntario.
Mhm. Maybe that's the reason the other dude told Vélez Vélez, este me tiene cara de voluntario. I don't trust him,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about important people during the activity. There's history is sometimes strange on who to emphasize. They emphasize Lluveras for a long time and very little Fidel Vélez Vélez.
I've always heard of Jubera. I mean, when I got to Puerto Rico, I was born in Brooklyn, lived there for 11 years, and I started junior high school
Mhm.
in Puerto Rico. And from junior high school all through high school, I heard Juberas I don't know how many times.
Mhm.
And I was struggling to learn the language, much less understand all this political shit they were throwing at me. I
Mhm.
literally started school understanding only 3 words of Spanish.
Wow.
So all of this was just un arroz con culo para mí.
Wow.
Okay. John likes that phrase, arroz con culo. But I never, ever heard outside of the family Fidel Vélez.
Mhm. No, absolutely. And there's a third dude that got a lot of attention, which is difficult to reach a conclusion on what's his importance, and it's Águila Blanca. There's a lot of curiosity and fascination with Águila Blanca. Some believe he was a hero. Others claim that he was just a bandit that at some point joined the revolution, but was not necessarily the revolutionary leader. But for some reason, since things were not well communicated, people were hungry for a name to say who was our leader, our hero during this critical moment.
But we love shit
97.
like that. Look at what we
Yeah.
did with Toño Bicicleta.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something like that. So I would tell people, hey, let history speak for herself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't force someone to be the hero because you might lose the
Vision of focus of
on who is the actual hero. Yeah. So people were so focused on saying whether or not Águila Blanca was a hero or a bandit that there was no attention on Fidel Vélez Vélez, for example. So some people defending Águila Blanca, others saying that he was just a bandit. So let's leave Águila Blanca for a side for a moment, and let's try to just read the documents and let the documents guide us.
What do you think it's gonna? We're approaching the time where we got to start wrapping up.
Sure.
We can be here for hours. I hope you definitely come back to do another segment with us.
Yeah.
When this is over, I'll stop the broadcast. You stay in the studio, and we can keep talking. You know, we got a lot to talk about. But the last question that I wanna present to you, and hopefully everybody is with me. What will it take to put this man and that battle into the history books? Like, it's in technically the history books, but it's not being taught. It's not being emphasized on. You're just kind of like scanning across the room and it happened to be in a corner. Let's give it its time and look at it.
Okay.
What will it take? And with that, we can wrap it up.
Sure. Well, let's do 2 things. I'm going to say that and also show the photograph.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
And after I answer that question, I'll show you the photograph, which some people thought for a long time that it was Águila Blanca. Later on, people realized it makes more sense that this is most likely or more likely a photograph of El Grito de Yauco or La Intentona de Yauco. And we can, it's evidence to be 100% sure, certainly will never be 100%. But apparently, the scholars and the experts are more generally with the idea that that's probably a photograph from La Intentona de Yauco, which is a treasure. Photographs were rare. And when photographs were made, it was not of action things that were happening. It was like a formal thing. So
you would have to stop there and pose and wait in the phosphorus.
Absolutely. So this is like a miracle. It's a miracle that photograph was taken. And I think that could be useful to say, did you realize that this should not exist? And it does. we don't have a photograph of Grito Lare for
Such a moment right before the let's go do this.
Yeah. Whenever I see that photograph, it gives me goosebumps. So do you see, history is more interesting when you let yourself go instead of focusing on whether this is Águila Blanca or not. Just it might be something even more interesting. Okay. So how can we communicate this better? I would say, let's try not to force things. There's two extremes. One extreme is to say, this was just a group of radicals, a minority. It failed. He arrived in cemeteries. Soldiers were there. They shot him and they left. That's not an epic battle. That's not no, it's not the Grito Lares. It's not El Grito de Yara. It's not the Cuban War of Independence. Cuba had a war. This was just an how to say, a skirmish, or not even a skirmish. It was just okay. That's one extreme. One extreme is saying, downplaying other things were important, whatever. The other extreme is to try to equate it as this is the revolution.
Right.
This is the revolution. And try to equate it to the wars in Cuba. And that is a bad idea, because then you start comparing.
We end up with that same gap that we have right now of information. Absolutely.
So I would say the context is important. El Grito, or la Intentona De Yauco, however we call it, is the proof that there was a revolutionary project, a plan, un plan de país, like people say, right? What makes a nation a nation? It proves it's an evidence that we were a nation. That's how I see it. It's an evidence that we were a nation, and we still are, because a nation is a group of people that feels identified with each other because they have a common past that they feel identified, but also they have a plan for the future, right? They're committed for the future. They're willing to die for the future. So if in one night you can gather 100 person, 200 or 500 people, that's the evidence that we were a nation. Okay. So that's how I see it.
And by that definition, just by loving your kids, you are a revolutionary and you are a nationalist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a matter of love. Absolutely. I agree with that. So that's the way I see it. Our war did happen. It is in Cuba. Our war of independence is in Cuba. And it had some manifestations here that could have developed to something more. Spain found out before, but that's the proof that we were willing to die and to work and to have a project for a country. So that's why I want to show the picture.
Yes, please.
It always gives me goosebumps. So
I am hoping, I mean, with those pictures, you can't really tell the background, but I am hoping to find those same foothills at the beginning when I get to the land. It would just mean so much.
Doesn't it feel like that place? It looks.
You know what? I'm going to be very honest. I remember walking that land, and it does have the same feel to it.
Wow. Yeah.
Let me make this just a little bigger so everybody can see. There we go. You can all Google La Intentona de Yauco, and this will come up.
Mm-hmm.
This will come up. And that is the original Puerto Rican flag flying in the air for the first time. The first fucking time. That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry. Let me bring you right back here. Riestra, I want to thank you so much.
No,
we're just starting this podcast, and you're an amazing individual to say, yeah, I'll go through and I'll help you. This is what we do. Casual conversations. Before we say goodbye, let me say this. Next week, everybody, same bad time, same bad place. Betances, okay? 7 o'clock next Thursday, we have Shoot the Shit podcast. We have Neil Watson. We have Manuel Hirao. And we have special guest Eddie Velez coming through. those of you, because I know I absolutely love the movie. If you remember the movie White Chicks, he's Gomez from White Chicks. My man has been around for a long time in the film industry, and he's going to be here next week talking and shooting the shit with us. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
so,
amazing.
Riestra, like I said, don't hang up. We got a few more things to talk to. I'm going to end the broadcast real soon. Everybody, like I always tell you, Hibaro, stay up, yo.